Yeah.
Kenston School's annual budget hearing. Today is February 19th, 2025. It is 9:02. Josh, are we on? Okay, good. Thank you. So we're on the record.
Do you need another packet? I have one.
Yeah, but do they have charts on there?
Do you want anything?
We'll start out by going through this first page. Tammy, are you going to do the numbers this time? You want to go ahead and start with the numbers for Kenston, starting with their general fund, please?
Sure. Kenston submitted their 2025-26 annual budget. In their general fund, they requested revenue in the amount of $42,555,351, and the Budget Commission will consider $42,291,210. And they estimated their expenses at $43,575,530, and their beginning cash balance was estimated at $8,068,841. And their estimated ending balance is $7,048,662, and our estimated ending balance for the general fund is $6,784,521.
And the revenue discrepancy, that's due to 98% collection recommendation from the treasurer versus 100. I think you estimate 100.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Annually, the treasurer indicates what he anticipates collection will be. It's been 98% for as long as I've been here. But, well, actually, we dropped it one year.
We moved it down.
Which was wrong.
But then we end up collecting 103%. So we typically collect over 100%.
We
But-
did this year again.
We're pretty conservative here, so we go with the 98%. Yep. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tammy.
In their bond fund, they submitted a beginning estimated balance of $1,354,852. They're requesting revenue in the amount of $2,715,353. The Budget Commission will consider $2,651,543. Estimated expenses at $2,702,198, leaving an ending cash balance of $1,304,197. The 2015 bond fund, they submitted a beginning cash balance of $395,702, requesting revenue in the amount of $411,662. The Budget Commission will consider $418,665. Estimated expenses of $591,831, leaving an ending cash balance estimate of $222,536. The 2024 PI levy, they submitted a beginning cash balance of $437,305, requesting revenue in the amount of $1,196,000. The Budget Commission will consider $1,159,935. Estimated expenses of $966,241, and the estimated ending balance of $630,999. They have total millage 4.5 inside general, 81.49 outside general, 1 permanent improvement, and 2.64 bonds for a total of 89.63 mils.
Okay, who'd like to go first?
Water eye.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have some presentation.
Yeah, Josh, can you pull up the PowerPoint? Share it. Thank you. I'm going to click through a couple slides. This represents a mapping of the county. I've highlighted with circles Kenston's area. I put this on because I think it's relevant to you understanding the dynamics of the entire county. In 2023, we had our sexennial where the entire county valuations rose by about 30%. In the Kenston School District, it rose on average 30.7%, a little bit above average, not by a lot. The interesting thing is I then weigh the next year's Board of Revision hearings by percentage to the school districts, because I think that it kind of is a form of a thermometer telling you what the temperament is. And I'll just by comparison compare you to West G just north of you, where West G had a little bit higher increase overall at 33%. You can see that almost 46% of the complaints for BORs came out of that territory. You had about what I would consider to be normal. I mean, there's 5 school districts. I would think it would be divided about 20% to each.
Mhm.
You were you're at the 18% level. But clearly there is a difference in viewpoint of taxing from the people that are in the Westie area versus the Kenston area. That's what I took away from this.
Yeah.
You can click to the next screen. This is where where your assessed values fell in total valuation. You're running at $1.2 billion of assessed evaluation. That change for last year represented about $14.5 million of valuation shift. Most of it's due to new construction, but not all. Next screen, please.
We average about what, 2%, 1.5%, 2.5%?
I
construction.
estimate 1 to 2%. I think yours was a little low last year.
Yep.
Probably closer to the 1% mark. This is where you rank in raw millage and then effective millage, not looking at floor calculation. Raw millage is deceiving because it's age-based, right? The older the levy, generally speaking, the higher the millage is represented by a district, but it yields the fewer dollar amount because the money is old. In your case, you rank number 1 in both categories, but you can see the discrepancy. You go from an 89.63 raw millage rate, which seems like, wow, that's a lot of millage. But when you take it to today's money, it's 31 mils. You got to be careful when people argue raw millage. It's very deceiving. But anyway, that's how you break out. You can see where those millages are placed, whether it's a bond, a permanent improvement, or current expense. It kind of gives you a comparative to other school districts. I don't know how relevant that is. Everybody's different, but nonetheless, I thought this was relevant. Next slide, please. And you click. Here's what you submitted. We went over those numbers. The as certified is the change of revenue because of the 98% number. And we click to the next one. I run a couple of ratios, the ones the state use. I think you report these to the state and then they generate graphs. I think it's good for us to use the same metrics, or we're kind of talking apples to grapefruits. You're running at 15.5%. You're well below the state cash as a percent of expenses by almost twofold. I mean, they're at 46%, I believe. You're way under that. Your gross, your general fund revenue per student is at 16,000 and some change. Next one. Your expenses per student are at 17,000. So you're running heavier on expenses than revenue. I think that's a cause of caution, not concern, but caution.
Mhm.
You're burning more than you're getting.
Yep.
That's just an indicator. And then your carryover cash is running $2,700 per student.
Yes, it does.
And then these are the indicators on the right of whether from last year, whether they're up or down. And it doesn't really tell you much, but there are indicators that you can look at year over year to see which way is the market moving. Are we becoming heavier in cash? Are we becoming less in cash? You're in a declining balance of cash as a
Deficit.
person. Yep. Next slide, please. This is how your enrollment is looking. And if over 5 years, you dropped enrollment by about 2.5%, you're actually below the reduction. It's kind of a weird thing. You're below that of the county. The county's running a more in the 3.5% rate. You're one of the lesser declining, but nonetheless declining. I think it's kind of relevant to see that. Next slide. This is how you stacked by year to all the other districts. You're the first set of bar graphs. You can see your decline at 2.5 compared to Cardinal at 17.5 decline. And then the others fall in line accordingly. The countywide one was 3.2 over 5 years. And the state is not much different. The state's seeing the
Yeah,
same.
this is a statewide phenomenon, right?
Yeah, it's not unique to Geauga, but we have pockets that are more dominant than others. Next slide, please. This is how your general fund revenue, expenses, and carryover cash per student compared to the other school districts in the county. I think it's pretty common. You see around the range from 15,000 and some change to the high of 20,000 in revenue per student is typical. You're right in the midpoint. I think that's good. You're about in the midpoint for expenses per student. So I don't think you're excessively spending per child. You're pretty much on average. I think you're slightly below average though in cash on hand per student.
Mhm.
And of course, these numbers all get skewed the lower the number of students you have, right? Because buildings still cost what they cost, even though you put X number of kids in it. I mean, we all know that there's a diminishing return curve you hit at some point with student enrollment. but I thought it's interesting to see the comparators.
Definitely.
Next slide, please. This is right out of the Ohio Department of Education Workforce. This is the chart that they run. You can see the blue line represents Kenston. That's that bottom line. You predicted last year you'd be at 16.8. The good news is you grew by about 2% cash over what you predicted. So you didn't spend as much or you had more revenue than you anticipated. Whichever that is,
So-
that's a good thing.
We did a right sizing and consolidation that helped us,
Yep.
with that. So
You anticipate for the next year dropping to 15.5. I think that's probably not a healthy thing to do long term because you're still on a declining balance and you're well below the state average. So the county average is the red bar, which is very similar to the state average. The state average right now is at 46% cash as a percent of expense in the general fund. You're well under half that amount. Next slide, please. This is how you compare with that ratio. Both the first bar in each of the charts is the 2023, 2024 actual performance. That's where you're sitting now. The next one is where you think you'll be sitting at the end of your next budget cycle. And you can see almost everyone predicts they're going to go down, which is pretty typical. You have expenses you've packed in that you think you're going to do. You may not do all of them, but you got to hedge your bet. You want to be conservative. And so that's a typical analysis we see. But I think it's important to know how much down that is. I think that's when the budgets start to run away from reality, right? The bigger the difference, probably the less realistic the budget is. And so if you look at the Kenston one, you're pretty tight between those two numbers. And again, the state average running at 46.1, you're way below and you're headed the opposite direction. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the, I think I spelled budget wrong, but it was pretty late last night. This is the kind of just a general summary. 1 mil for Kenston produces about $1.2 million at 100% collection. Your new construction gave you about $8,000 of revenue. Not a lot. It didn't even hedge your bet for inflation, but nonetheless, it's better than zero. It's better than a negative, as Chris would say.
Sure.
The revaluation did raise your inside millage permanently, at least as of right now, to $1.16 million. You are not at the floor, so you have no floor adjustment. You have a new 1 mil permanent improvement levy for 2024, and you'll be collecting that this year. And then your 2023 general fund revenue increased $3 million, and your general fund expenditures increased slightly more than $3 million. So I think that is probably why you're seeing your decline in cash, because
that's exactly.
you're anticipating burning more than you're going to get in. I think, is that it? That's the last slide, Josh. Yeah, that's it. So, I mean, I don't think anything here is a revelation to anybody.
No. Yeah,
I
all
think-
things we're trying to manage the right sizing, the consolidation. We're looking closely at our cash balance. Like you said, it's about 18% of our overall expenditures. We anticipate it to go down. We're trying to take action now as we speak to do things and just try to extend that need to go out for the operating levy. So yeah, all good stuff.
Okay. That's all I have. That's your PowerPoint right there.
Yeah. So the key is we typically tell you we're going to use a 98% collection. We slightly over succeeded.
Yeah. Good job.
But I could never schedule that and tell you we're going to really rock the house. I don't know if there was one particular delinquency that was collected that was overwhelmingly in your favor, but clearly somebody in my office is doing their job, or
We do some of that.
or the prosecutor's people.
If it goes down, it's his fault. If it goes up, it's something else.
Yeah.
It's good management. That's right.
But it is an indication of, the success and financial stability of Geauga County that we all enjoy. We are very lucky to be in this county.
Absolutely.
But I will continue using 98% unless, we have real troubles, and then we'll go back down, and then they'll fool us again. And if the taxpayer, it's amazing to me. We have taxpayers, the moment the bill goes out, people used to walk over to Bank One, cash a check to get cash and bring it to me and make their payment.
Wow.
Now they have to go off the square to get cash. They still want to bring cash. God bless them. I encouraged them to just mail a check, said, no, I pay my taxes. So, okay, God bless. We're very lucky.
Yeah.
That's
It's a good culture to have in Geauga County like that.
Yeah.
People willing to do that.
that's all I have.
Yeah, I really didn't have any problems. I think you're running as hot as Chuck showed you. You're running as hot or hotter than any other district in the county. So, I noted your general fund expenses. I think I made this comment last year. We're pretty flat for several years,
Mhm.
and then they did jump up the last 23-24 fiscal year. It was about a $3 million increase, but then you kind of predicted that they're going to stay. You actually have your estimated expenses for the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year are exactly the same. So I don't know if that jump were you using general fund money for PI when you didn't have that PI money?
Yes, we would make a transfer.
That's what I was looking at. Because I was looking in the.
What prompted us to do that PI levy.
And is there still money in that then? Because you had it in kind of like a.
Yes.
You have a PI in your
earlier this
003?
year. Yeah, we made a transfer earlier this year, about $600,000 prior to November, because we weren't sure, what the outcome of the levy was going to be, and we needed to spend some of that money. But thankfully, the voters really supported us and decided to pass that PI levy in November. So we'll collect about $1.2 million for that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think because you passed the PI levy, some of your cash balance problems might not. You had that big jump, which was you basically funding the PI improvements out of the general fund. With the PI levy, it looks like your expenses then normalize and stay flat again, which I think
For a few years,
So I think you're in really good shape.
I hope so.
But
You better be.
Your cash balance. I mean, your cash balance is getting to the point where I would be concerned.
Yes, we've talked about that. The board knows, our new superintendent knows. We're monitoring that and actively taking action. Like I said, we did the right sizing, the consolidations, saved about $1.3 million. We're looking at schedules. We're looking at, attrition. We're making sure we really watch those closely. It's like you said, trying to get a couple more years out of it before we need to, do something.
Yeah, well, that's all I had.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Yes.
Okay, yes, paperwork somewhere. This is
Going down the way. That one. is the resident, that one's yours.
Switch.
why is there a difference?
I just want to say also, Timmy and Kristen do a great job of answering all questions.
Okay.
So, yeah, they do.
You won't fire them then.
That's great.
That's the way it is.
That's right.
Call them off.
Yes. I appreciate all your help.
Did you get your rate resolution too?
I think
Yes.
I gave them the one that you told me to.
Is it attached here? Okay.
It's attached.
So we got everything on?
Just did what they told me.
That's all we need to do.
Got it.
So put the instructions, we follow. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Nice meeting again. Nice meeting.
Next meeting.
Terry, how are you? Okay, next up is Cardinal. Very good seeing you again. Good morning. It says starting at 9:30. We can't start early, correct?
No.
We didn't
no,
advertise it.
We advertised for.
We just put it on this.
Yeah, it's an
For
For
reference,
Eagles? Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so we can't start. That's one.
Yeah.
Well done.
We tried.
We're gonna open the hearing for Cardinal. If you want to start with the numbers, Tammy, we'll go from there.
Cardinal Local School District submitted their 2025-2026 budget with a beginning estimated balance in their general fund of $5,624,978. They're requesting revenue in the amount of $14,797,105. The Budget Commission will consider $14,515,441. Estimated expenses of $15,900,000 with an ending balance of $4,240,428. The bond fund, they submitted a beginning estimated balance of $886,369. Estimated revenue at 0, but the Budget Commission will consider 62,681. Estimated expenses of 679,500, leaving an ending balance of 269,550. Permanent improvement, beginning estimated balance of 257,333. Requesting revenue in the amount of 426,000. The Budget Commission will consider 453,846. Estimated expenses of 412,321, leaving an ending cash balance of 298,858. Total millage is 3.5 inside general, 1 inside permanent improvement, 53.1 outside general, and a total of 57.6. They do receive manufactured homes revenue last year in the amount of 33,229.81.
And the general fund discrepancy revenue, the revenue that was due to 98% as well.
Yes.
Before you just roll, you're the only one here from Cardinal?
Yes, sir.
Who's your superintendent?
Jack Cunningham.
Okay, and you have 5 board members?
Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't let them know.
they were aware of the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
That's a horrible sign that they chose not to attend what is a public hearing
Yeah, I can't speak for their schedules.
on their budget. Okay,
Want me to go first?
yeah.
yeah,
So I will provide feedback to them, and I met with you last
Yeah.
week and provided.
Perry and I met last week. We
I'm
had,
not trying to beat you up,
Sure.
just, people are watching this and I want
You gotta
everyone to know that your superintendent, none of the administration except you and none of the board members are here.
oh, hang on, you're
I
going way
will
back.
make sure to.
Back up.
update
Yeah, you
them
are. You're
on
past
here.
Right
Oh,
there.
of course, yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. So again, this is the same slide that we showed for Kenston. This one's highlighting Cardinal. You're quite the anomaly, as we talked a couple of days ago. You had an increase of an average of 29% due to the reappraisal in 2023. That represented, though, a BOR hearing caseload of 4.5%, which I don't understand that. I'm happy to see it. It's far below the average for what I would have expected. But that means that tells me the taxpayers are not anxious right now with their values and their taxes they're paying, especially with schools, because that's the dominant recipient of tax. Next slide, please. You rank in school assessed value at $463 million in total value for last year. That was an increase of about $9 million, which was pretty healthy for the county for their size. Next slide, please. You rank 3rd in raw millage and 5th in effective millage. So you're the least funded effectively. Coincidentally, this year you're at the floor, which prior years you had been hovering around 21 mills. But you're now at the floor. I think you're at 20.01. You're like the closest to the floor that you can get. Effectively, you're there. But I think that I think we talked a little bit about the raw millage. You got to be careful looking at raw millage because it is very deceiving based on age of a school district. Next slide. Next click. This is your submission that we discussed. If you can click to the next. That produces a cash as a percent of expenditures of 26.7. You are a little bit north of half of what the state average is at 46. But I mean, I think the trend is more important when you're in that position than the actual number. Next one, you're at $20,000 roughly in revenue per student. And your student count is at 723 reported to the state. The next slide. Your expenses are at about $22,000 per student. So you're burning about $2,000 more per student than you're receiving in revenue, which is an indicator. Last click. Your cash as a percent per student is about $5,800 per kid. That's considered low considering the other schools in the district, which the next slide should show. These are the trends, whether you're going up or down compared to last year. This is probably the most troubling chart that I've seen, and we talked about it at length when you were in. You're seeing a 17% reduction of enrollment over the last 5 years. I think you shared with me that you're down below 700 now. So that trend is apparently continuing, and that puts some real cost pinches on your district. I don't know the solution. I just know how to read the number.
And I'm happy to share some of the things that we're
Okay.
doing.
Next slide, please. This is how you rank comparatively to the other districts in the county. You can see that your enrollment count is considerably greater than the county average and the greatest in the entire county. So that's a cause of concern. And you did share some of the things. You want to talk about them now? That would be great.
Sure. We've in the last 5 years, of course, I'm in my year 2, we're closed our second building to downsize the district and our footprint operational cost. There's discussion about how to increase enrollment. We're happy to hear there's a couple housing developments coming, but you never know if there's going to be children. But there's a lot of talk about how to outreach to those families. We have a high number of homeschooled students, so outreach to those families and tell them what Cardinal has to offer. So there's a lot of efforts being made there. Obviously, discussion about right sizing of staff as well. We have seen significant decreases. It's definitely on our radar. Economies of scale doesn't help, when you're that small and you're shrinking. So we've looked at things to get things under control on the expense side.
Next slide, please. This is how your revenue, expenses, and carryover per student compare with other entities. You're at $5,800 per student in carryover per child. That's not excessive in my view. The two causes of concern for me are the revenue and expenses per student, but that's a function of the low enrollment rate. I mean, I think you're reaching a point quickly where your facility is costing you more to keep open than you can occupy with kids, and that ratio is going to just keep going up because you got to have a whole building. You can't have a half a building for half the kids. Sure. Next slide, please. This is you've done a great job of improving your cash position. You're right at the state average, which is good. You predicted you'd be at 34.9. You hit 42, so you exceeded. And you shared with me some sales. You sold some properties, and that generated some revenue that was unanticipated, which caused that cash to climb. You're right at the state average. That's a good thing. You anticipate a decline next year to 26.7%. That's according to your budget estimate, and we will see where that develops as the year goes on. Next slide, please. This is how you rank compared to the other districts in the county. And again, the average is 46%. You're just slightly below that, and you anticipate dropping a bit. And again, that delta, I think, is when I see a huge delta change, to me, that's a warning that the budget may not be true to reality. Either there's anomalies occurring that we haven't predicted, or something is going to occur or anticipate occurring that is well outside of the scope of what we can look in the near future on. Sales of buildings are definitely those kind of things, right? That drives numbers crazy because huge revenue comes in that's not recurring. It's a one-shot deal.
If I may address that, if that's okay.
Yep.
We have the one building up for sale, and I have to transfer about $800,000 this year, which impacts the carryover to take care of some fund. We have a roof we're doing, some other capital improvements. If that building would sell for $1 million, then that would backfill that, and we'd see a better carryover next year. So I just want to put that on the table that if it's coming next year and we're at 35 or 40, it's because of that sale.
Where are you transferring that from? That 800,000 from the general
Right
fund?
now from the general fund.
Into what?
That's beyond capital improvements.
Into the PI fund?
We set up.
You have a separate capital?
Which is zero right now.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're going to fund those projects through a transfer there.
Okay. And that's not in the budget.
No,
It's just buried as an expense in the general fund.
It's a transfer out of there.
Okay.
Exactly.
Next
So
slide.
hopefully it sells and we have 35-40% is what I'm projecting, depending on the sale.
Okay. Next slide. So here are your stats, if you will. One mill produces about $463,000 for you at 100% collection. You got about $6,600 in new construction revenue, which is interesting because Kenston wasn't that much more, and they're a much bigger district. So you benefited from new construction kind of abnormally in the county, which I was surprised to see that. The reval raised your inside millage about $400,000. You have 1 mil inside that's being redirected to a permanent improvement levy. Because you're currently at the floor now, that's a different scrutiny point for us. We talked about that when you were in. And your general fund revenue increased by $1.5 million over the prior year, and your expenses increased by 1.9 million. So that's where your excess burning of money occurred. Next slide, please. So I did a summary of your PI because you're at the floor now, and I need to be cautious of inside millage being moved into a PI and what that creates as a unanticipated or an unexpected tax increase to a taxpayer. Click, please. This is what you submitted. You're now at the floor, and your PI fund had a beginning balance of about $250,000 with revenue about 450,000, expenses about 400,000, and ending balance about 300,000. If you click again, please. I see in calculating this, you have excessive balance in that fund at the end of the year. At least you don't show the need for that $298,000. I'm going to recommend to the Budget Commission that we only permit half of the amount to be transferred into the PI fund from the general fund, which will keep the other half in the general fund, which will help your cash balance, but more importantly, will not cause an unintended consequence to the taxpayers. Half of that is $226,923. It will leave you an ending balance in the permanent improvement fund of about 72,000, assuming you spend all of your expenses. And basically that's because there was no representation that I could see in the budget submission of the need for that other $225,000. Unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, if I may, I had shared a capital improvement plan.
The green,
which we were going to transfer from the general fund to that.
Right.
That's beyond what we have in our permanent improvement fund. So just so you have knowledge. Yeah,
and I took a look at that green folder, and that's why I asked the question, is that going into the PI fund or is that going into a different fund? And you indicated that's going into a different fund. Yeah. So PI is not affected by that $800,000 requirement for that building improvement.
That building improvement is beyond what we have in the PI fund currently as it stands. Yes.
Next slide. So what that will do to your general fund, this is as you submitted. If you click again, Josh, this is what will happen to your adjusted values. It will increase your revenue in the general fund by $226,923. That will increase your ending cash balance by that same amount. No other items are affected. You're still burning more than you're receiving in revenue, but you're burning a little less. That's, you're basically retaining that 226,000 in the general fund. I think that's it, unless I gave some stats. That'll actually change your anticipated cash as a percent of expenditures and make it go up a little bit to 28%, which I think is healthier since the average in the state is 46. Next click. Your general fund revenue will change a little bit and go up to about 20,000, almost 21.3 per student. Next click. Your general fund expenses will be at about 22,000. You're still burning more than you're receiving. And then last click. Your carryover cash per student goes up slightly to $6,000 per student. So I think it actually healthens your general fund because your PI fund doesn't show a need. If that makes sense.
Half of the inside millage would from the PI would be moved to general fund.
I think you're doing a 1 mil right now.
Yes.
I'd recommend a $0.5 mil be moved and a $0.5 mil stay in the general fund.
Now, on our end, legally, does the board have to take any action, or that just gets
I don't know.
dictated from?
Or
they'll be approving the rates. So
it'll be in your certificate. Your board will have to approve that certificate.
Okay.
So I think that action.
Would it move in the warrant?
Their rates will indicate where the money is being directed. And so if we reduce the PI transfer from the general fund by half, it'll be reflected in the rate. And so you should have no other specific board action required to do that. Once they approve the rates.
So you want to shift part of their PI inside millage?
Half. I'm going to only allow half of it to be moved into the PI.
How much revenue? Will they lose revenue because they're at the floor?
They will get, they're at the floor. They won't get an adjustment. They will stay above the floor by that 2026.
So it won't affect their.
No.
Okay.
Because they're not below the floor. They haven't been adjusted before. They've never been below.
And the end result to the taxpayer is the tax bill will be the same.
Yes. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
There'll be no increase in tax due to a floor adjustment as a result of dipping below the floor because that PI transfer is not counted in the floor.
We had a bond issue drop off, so it
But
actually,
that's not counted in the floor either.
right.
So that's, my motion is, I was gonna wait till you guys are all done, but
When you wait, are you
I'm done.
finished?
Mhm.
Okay. If you interpret the collection of delinquent taxes as an indication of financial stability, Cardinal is the most stable. Because we didn't collect all that much compared to the other school districts, only $229,000. That's still a lot of money.
Mhm.
But compared to the other school districts, it's the least amount. My real concern, I believe this sheet of actual versus expected cash balances are very indicative of good budgeting. You joined in 2023, all right?
Yeah, August of 23.
Okay. So the ship had already left the port by the time you came in. But my concern would be when the school district is telling the taxpayers they anticipate an ending cash balance for the PI fund of $14,000, and they end up, I can't read upside down,
451.
almost $500,000. That's really bad budgeting. And then the following year, it shows an estimated and the beginning cash balance of 130 grand, and there's that $500,000 again. My hope is you're going to quickly clean that up,
Yes.
so it will be far more honest.
Yes.
Your biggest challenge is declining enrollment, and I think it's wonderful that you are aware of it, and the school board needs to get on it because the taxpayers, while they are very supportive of the schools, all the schools in the county, they're getting to a point where they're not going to provide you with additional resources. So I encourage you to get the message to the board who chose not to attend this hearing. It's one hearing a year, and nobody could come except for you.
Actually, I'm here.
Oh,
I'm the
and
vice
the
president.
superintendent and vice president. I did not see you come in.
Good. We're very glad you're here.
You're welcome to sit with me.
Well, the message is being delivered.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
And I would say, like, I did make them aware of the kind of variances over the years, the board. Just recently, we talked about those things or shared those items with them and how we need to narrow that and do better at it. Some of the things in the PI had a lot to do with projects that were not, we thought we'd be ready for that. So we are on top of that. And I had shared earlier that with the enrollment, I know there's been discussion with our leadership team and our board to try to reach out to some new housing developments, reach out to people that are homeschooled.
Yeah, that's great.
It's tough because we talk about economies of scale being a smaller district. But there are things being done. We've closed 2 buildings. But we hear you. I mean, we know enrollment's an issue. The board and the administration continue to work on it.
What do you think the bottom line is on your enrollment before you have some very hard decisions to make? Where do you think that number is? You're below 700 now, right?
Yes.
Where do you think that the bottom is?
I will have the academic leader of the district here that I would say is more suited to talk about enrollment than me as the treasurer. I was a superintendent one time. I know to weigh in where I should. I also know to defer when it's time to defer. But I don't know, Jack, if you want to talk about.
Yeah, we're investigating that, and if we don't know the number, we have a number ourselves. That's internally what we've been talking about.
Other questions?
We do know it's a challenge.
I mean, I still think you're not flirting with not being viable. You know, I mean,
Correct.
it's still enough of a student count where you've easily got a couple classes per grade, right? I mean,
Yes.
Um,
We, in fact, our kindergarten class, we went from 2 classes to 3 this year. So we had a spike in kindergarten. So we've talked already. We're hoping to see that
You're
again.
gonna have a spike, that's where you want it.
That's where we
Yeah.
want it, and then it starts to carry forward.
kindergarten numbers, the bane of every school district.
That's right.
You don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, I think last year we talked to you, there were some issues, especially with historic budget estimates. And I think you've done a great job turning that around. I think you actually, we talk about when you get into this cycle of grossly, not you, I'm saying we deal with this, you know, because we do all the townships and
Sure.
municipalities and all the library, everybody. And you get into the cycle of you keep underestimating cash balances and it builds every year, right? Because you're in the current year right now. And so it's very hard to use Chris's analogy of the ship. It's very hard to turn that ship around. But you've done it pretty quickly, to your credit. I really think you did you've done a really good job. And I think from a 1 year to the next year turnaround, I don't know that you could possibly do much better. So
We'll keep trying.
I'm curious about the moving the PI money. I mean, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts? It seems like
And
you're
if you're
funding.
first, I'd rather be lucky.
Yeah, I mean,
think
yeah.
that's not gonna
I mean, it seems
surprise
like
you.
you're funding PI stuff out of the general fund now, right? I mean,
We are. It's a mixture of using up the PI funds. We have over $1 million in 5-year plan capital expenditures that are underfunded beyond what we get in PI. So that's where I say we're moving money from the general to a capital improvement fund to pay for everything that the PI cannot afford. We had a roof estimate come in at $550,000. That's one of the major things we'll be doing. So you'll see that encumbered. I don't know that it'll be done this fiscal year, but it'll all be encumbered POs for that. It may be a mixture of PI and capital improvements, but we will use the PI money. I mean, it's I prefer obviously it be at one, but I know that's a budget commission decision.
Yeah, I mean, our goal and our requirement is to look in the year submitted. And especially when you're at the floor and you're transferring it from the general fund, because there's consequences to that transfer to the taxpayer. You know, and the issue that I've seen, not necessarily with Cardinal, but to some degree with Cardinal in the past, is money is accumulated. And if it's being accumulated and there's no effect on the taxpayer, that I'm not as concerned about it. When there is an unintended consequence, then we have to take, I think, a conservative approach. And if in fact you needed that extra $226,000, I would have expected to see that in a budget submission where we're going to burn it all, and then we're going to need even more out of the general fund. And then I would not have the same position I'm taking. But absent that, I have to go off of what I've got. And I think that just holds people accountable for the numbers they present. So
To Chuck's point, had that PI balance, the estimated ending cash balance was $14,000. It actually was $457,000. That's a variance of 3,000%. If the actual cash balance had been close to that $14,000, Chuck can make that point.
Sure.
So the money was supposed to have been spent. It didn't get spent. It's been sitting there. And what would have happened if you look at your crystal ball, is there a levy coming in the next 3 to 5 years?
We don't anticipate any
No.
tax increases.
Because
Not
there
as far
would be,
as I go.
if you're below the floor, there's an automatic tax increase on the voters without a vote. That's what we're all trying to avoid.
Mhm.
By if you had actually, not you, but it's you. If you'd spent the money that you said you were going to spend back in 23, we wouldn't have this conversation. So I think it's to your advantage to make sure that roof project gets done. Spend the money out of PI and use the money out of the general fund as has been the past practice.
and then if next year you have need for $450,000, which is $1 million, then represent that. And ask to have that transferred. There will be consequences to the taxpayer if that's shifted from inside millage and you drop below the floor. But I don't feel in good conscience that I can affect the taxpayer while there's cash remaining in that fund that's not been budgeted. Because that shouldn't be a tax increase for somebody because it's just not being used. It's in the bank. So we either have to have it one way or the other. And that you've never been under that scrutiny before because you've always been above the floor. But
Right.
when you hit the floor, it's a different argument now because there's an additional tax that most people are unaware of.
Yeah, and sometimes, well, and oftentimes it's about timing when you're talking $400,000. This project's planned.
Yep.
And then it doesn't happen for whatever reason. Buses don't come in or whatever it is. We're not ready to do that because we're closing the building. So that impacts the whether it gets spent or not that fiscal year, obviously. And I know we talked, I'd probably be more concerned if I didn't see legislation out of Columbus that would roll in all of these outside of the floor. I'd probably be more concerned, but I see that happening
Well,
anyway.
And to that point, I think if all 88 counties were scrutinizing the unintended consequences that we're trying to do here, I don't know that you'd have this groundswell of complaint being driven at the state level about what happens when floor gets adjusted without people understanding what they voted for. And so I can't speak to the other 87 counties and how they do their job. I can only do what we think is right to do. But, I think we discussed this. The temperament is cleaning this mess up somehow. School funding is completely screwed up. I don't know that anybody's going to argue with that. But it's been that way for 35 years or more, and yet there's been very little movement to correct it. And now people are just tired of things that happened 2 years ago with a sexennial that generated a huge change to the tax base that was not anticipated. And should it have been anticipated? We could argue that till we're blue in the face. But most taxpayers that vote for a levy, I voted for levies my entire life. I never understood the difference between voting for an emergency versus a operating levy versus a bond, that these would be counted, these wouldn't be counted. I never understood that. And it's never presented that way. And until you are affected by it, you really don't have any need to learn it. Now we all have learned it. So I think we have an onus to represent the taxpayers and their interest. And I don't want them to be mad at the school or, hey, I got this huge tax increase and you're holding $250,000 in this fund. Well, yeah, that's a good argument. I mean, that's a valid consideration that we have to all take into account. So,
And if I could add to, could I add something?
Yeah, sure.
As we talk, we have the lowest taxes in the county. I actually received an email last week from a taxpayer. I think I shared it with you. What happened? My taxes went down. So I'm going to print that because I may never get in my career.
You want to frame it?
Like
Oh, yeah.
So I think there is that understanding in our community that we do have the lowest taxes and they benefit that way as well. And that we still provide a good education.
You do. And I think we want to protect that relationship. We don't want the taxpayers to become angry because something happens they didn't anticipate. Everyone's eyes should be wide open. And that's.
Though that taxpayer could send a contribution. And it's taxed enough. Do you have anything further, Jim?
Are they receiving floor adjustment revenue currently?
No.
So if we're gonna shift their inside millage, which is well within our duties, whether a board initiates an inside millage shift, that's always come to us for approval. We can also
adjust revenues.
Well, we can suppress collection, but we can also, this doesn't adjust revenue. This just directs it, right? If they're not receiving.
Adjust the revenue in their PI. Put it in the general fund.
Yeah, so I think we should vote on that separately. I have a difference of opinion on the PI, but I won't go into it. I think it's more of a cash management issue. I would encourage you to do your roof project and spend the PI money. If you were receiving floor adjustment revenue, or you were going to in the near future, which you may, I would feel differently about shifting the millage. But I think the commission should vote. We've always voted on millage shifts, whether initiated by us or requested by the entity. I think we've always voted on that as a standalone, and then if that passes, then we would vote on the budget with that adjustment. Follow me?
So do you have a,
Yeah, so my motion was to rescind half a mil of the general fund money being redirected to the PI.
So you would have
Half-
3 points, you'd have four mils inside general fund, 0.5 mils inside permanent improvement.
That's correct.
second? Call the question.
Aye.
No. Okay, and then you
So
would,
now we have the budget.
yeah, move to approve the budget with the millage shift. It's your motion.
Okay, so moved.
Second,
Yes.
yes.
Aye.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we'll have to, our certificate will have. to
Yeah,
be
we're gonna have
correct.
to,
Adjust.
yes,
We have to do the rate resolution and the certificate.
yeah, the budget commission doesn't serve pre-cooked meals, so when we make decisions, we gotta.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, they do have pre-cooked meals. They're just, we're not on the menu right now.
Can I add a comment about the state funding? Because there was comments made about state funding. You hear that all the time. I will share that I feel that the state has come a long way with the new funding system. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but they're looking to phase in the final phase, year 5 and 6, which will be a new funding system. It is better than it was, but there are some key components in the budget right now that need change. They're basing everything off of 2022 cost figures and not updating them. And if that happened, I really and fully funded everything in it, I feel we'd go a long way in having a constitutional funding system. That being said, we get about $3,500 a kid at our district. And I did an analysis of 20 districts that are most similar to us by Ohio Education Workforce, and they get 8,500 on average. We get 3,500. So we're at a disadvantage, obviously, when it comes to state funding. That being said, they've made a lot of headway. There's some really good things that have happened, but they need to maintain guarantees as well as.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I get anxious when they want to tinker with valuation to control tax. Because they're connected, but that's not how you value a house. You don't value a house based on what you pay in tax. You value a house on what it's market for.
Mhm.
And then the tax is something people vote typically to have weighed against their evaluation. Almost everyone who comes before the BOR, first thing out of their mouth is, I'm here because I want my value reduced because I pay too much taxes. Well, those are two different problems. And so I don't want to artificially suppress somebody's value to shift it to their neighbor who didn't file a complaint. And then that neighbor is paying your tax bill. I mean, it's got to be a fairness. And so I'm resisting with everything I have, the state trying to alter the appraisal process because they think that's the component that's flawed, when in fact, it's the funding problem that's at fault, in my view. But
Yeah, the problem, I mean, they've got to fix the funding formulas. I mean, that's ridiculous. You only get 3,500 per student. Totally ridiculous.
And it's based on local capacity, which that presents real challenges. I mean, to districts, because when you're a high value district, yet your demographics aren't higher income. Those are the districts that really get, and we lost TPP dollar. I mean, it's been a compounding effect by some things that we just fall into the wrong side of the ledger sometimes on these things. But I do think there's been a lot of good work done on fixing for school funding, but there's some more work to be done.
Terry, remember, you've been in this game for a long time. You're being rational. You're dealing with government.
Sure.
Well, I know that.
I hear you.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. You really did. You did a great job.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Feel free.
See ya.
Next up is Chardon.
I'm joined by our board president, Karen Blankenship.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, how are you? Good morning.
Is that a Jared Garcia?
It sure is. Not many people notice that.
How'd you get those? I can have.
I'm too cheap.
I have a Christmas one.
A Christmas Garcia?
Yeah, my wife paid for it.
You wear it once.
That's what my point.
We're going to open the Chardon Local School District Annual Budget Hearing. Amy, could you start with numbers, please?
Chardon Local School District submitted their 2025-2026 budget with beginning estimated balance in their general fund of 18,085,455. They requested revenue in the amount of 39,779,340. The Budget Commission will consider 39,435,81. Requested expenses in the amount of 44,016,223. Leaving an ending cash balance of 13,504,313. The Permanent Improvement Fund, they submitted a beginning estimated balance of 36,895, requesting revenue in the amount of 2,278,229. The Budget Commission will consider 2,308,647. Estimated expenses of 2,311,191, leaving an ending cash balance of 34,351. Their debt fund, which is funded by a transfer from their permanent improvement fund, has a beginning estimated balance of 35,000, estimated revenue of 411,100, estimated expenses of 411,100, leaving an ending balance of 35,000. The total millage for 25-26 is 3.5 inside general, 1 inside permanent improvement, 74.18 outside general, 2 outside permanent improvement for a total of 80.68. They do receive revenue from manufactured homes. Last year, it was $176,025.39.
Okay, we'll make it first.
Sure.
You could start from current next time, but keep going. Okay, this is your, similar to other districts we've shown. You are, again, kind of an anomaly. You saw a 26.4% average increase, a little bit below average for the entire county, but far below average of BOR hearing requests. So I think, again, as I mentioned before, to me, when the bottom number for BOR hearing percentage is higher than anticipated, to me, that's a barometer of sorts telling me that the public is anxious about the burden that's being placed on them for taxes. I would have expected you to be around the 20% mark. You were well below that. I think that's an indicator, a very supportive base. And likewise, you have a very healthy student enrollment number, although it's declining, but it's still healthy. Next slide. For 2024, your valuation was just a little bit south of $1 billion at 963 million. You had an increase in change in value of about $8 million. And that was fundamentally due to the ag-res area for new construction areas. Next slide. You rank second in both categories of raw millage and effective millage. Your distribution is as proportioned there. Again, I always caution people looking at full millage. It's virtually meaningless. You got to be careful comparing it because it's apples to grapefruits, no matter who you're talking to. Next slide. This is your submitted information in your general fund with an ending balance at about 13,500,000. Next slide. Your ratios then fall out to be your cash as a percent of expenses anticipated to be right a little bit south of 31%, which is about 10 points below, almost 15 points below the state average. Next, click. General fund revenue is about $15,800 per student. General fund expenses, click, are $17,000. So you're, again, burning about $2,000 per student more in expenses than revenue. That's an indicator. Next slide. Your carryover per student is about $5,400. And click again.
And a lot of that burning is one-time capital improvement.
That's
expenditures.
hopefully that's true. So those numbers will switch quickly.
That's right.
But there's kind of how you've changed from last year to this year. So you're on the decline side with cash carryover per student. I think you've done a very good job at burning excess cash. I mean, for meaningful projects, not just burning it. But
Right.
Our goal is to spend it wisely, but spend it when given it. Next slide. This is how your enrollment is falling out in the last 5 years. down about 9.5%. There's definitely bubbles going on there, and that's probably something you want to address because you are greater than the county average.
Mhm.
Being centrally located, that was a surprise to me that it was that high. I don't know whether it's homeschooling or private schools. You have Notre Dame and some other private facilities nearby, which may be competitors and pulling students away, but it's definitely it's significant enough to be concerned about. Next slide, please. This is how you stack compared to the other districts in the county by year. Again, the county average was 3.2%. You were about 3 times the county average over the 5-year period. Next slide. Revenue, expenses, and carryover on a per student basis comparatively, you are one of the lowest revenue and expenses, which I think is a very good indicator. Your carryover per student is the third highest or the third lowest, depending on which way you're looking at it. You're right in the middle of the pack. I think you're right where I think you're right where you should be personally. I think that's kind of the sweet spot. Everyone wants to be average, except when you take your test, right? You want to be above average when you take your test. Next slide. This is the chart. The blue is your cash as a percent of expense that you provided to the state on an annual basis. You ended the year at 56%. You predicted you'd be at 39. You exceeded that. So you're still above the state average by 10 margin points. It's not a bad thing. I mean, somebody's got to be above and somebody's got to be below the bar. It's how averages work. But you are approaching the average, which I think everyone wants to approach the average and then get stable, right? The overall trend in the state has been an upward increase. It's doubled in the last 5 years, which I think is an indicator of sorts. I don't know exactly what that's showing, but the county as a whole is slightly below the average. You're running slightly above. You anticipate being at 30.7%. I don't know that that's going to happen, but we'll see, right? It's a prediction. Next slide. This is how you stack compared to the other districts. Again, you are sitting slightly above the average, but you predict you're going to fall below the average. I think that gap is what I'm considering to be probably not going to happen exactly as anticipated. The bigger the gap, the less likelihood it's going to occur. The narrower that gap, probably the more probable it will occur.
I think it will occur because we have a one-time expenditure that's rather large. That's driving down the balance is our transportation compound.
Okay. Next slide, please. This is the summary of your what you submitted. One mill produces just a little bit less than $1 million of collection at 100%. New construction was only 6.75 K in revenue for you for last year, which I thought was kind of low considering the number of developments that are going on in Chardon. I don't know. Maybe TIFs are probably affecting this money.
Yes.
So, and I'm not a big advocate of a TIF, to be honest with you, but they are what they are, and you have to deal with them when they come.
I'm the opposite of a big advocate. I'm a big critic of the TIF.
Well, I'm not a big advocate.
Let's load a bunch of kids in and then stiff the school.
Dollars. You are well above the floor. There was no adjustment. Your general fund revenue increased by 3.85 million, and your expenses increased by 3 million, a little bit over 3 million. So you were, I think you tuned, which I think is healthy. I much rather see revenue exceeding expenditures for schools than I see the other way, because that's just a bad thing, right? Next slide. That's it. So I found you have aligned your monies very well in the last 2 years. I applaud you for doing that. The only question I did have is I did receive a call from a member of the House who indicated that you, and I think this happened last year. You guys we're getting a grant for $250,000 for a facility in one of your sports places to put in.
If I may.
Yeah, restroom or something.
We did not receive that money.
Okay.
There was a private community group that basically approached the representative, Fowler Arthur, to construct a restroom concession stand project at Memorial Field. That was done kind of independent of the school district.
Okay.
We came into that later. Our board has had discussions about that project. The overall project was estimated at about 1.2 million to complete. Simply didn't have the available capital dollars to do that with all the other capital projects that we're undertaking.
Okay.
And the capital projects that we have identified that are, quite frankly, higher priorities that we can't get to at this point, to make up the difference of essentially another 900,000. The board directed me and the treasurer to communicate with that community group and kind of put together a plan that or a proposal, if you will, to say, if you can do this. They have represented that there were community interests to do donations and things like that towards this project. And so we tried to put together a funding model to say, if you can hit these funding targets, the board can make up the difference and put it into the capital plan and get it completed. My understanding is so far that those additional targets were not achievable. So we're kind of in a spot right now.
Where does the grant stay right now? What's the status?
It's not in our possession, the school
Right.
district's
Who
possession.
would get the money?
The
Uh,
booster
The
organization.
community group that
And are they the ones who applied for it?
Yes.
they did.
Okay.
Now,
I don't know that she's aware of that totally.
Okay.
She's a little confused. She thinks the school is the one that's just changed their mind.
no,
And I will talk with her.
and I wanted to get to that point.
Yeah.
So I met with a representative of the community group who brought a different idea to do press box renovation at Memorial Field. I said, fine. I raised the caveat that I don't know that the legislature is going, they earmarked it for project A.
Right.
You want to use it for
Right.
project B. But I'll be happy to reach out to the representative and try to open discussion, which I did. And,
Okay.
And so that's kind of where that stands right now. Is there any consideration? And I asked Representative Fowler Arthur what the mechanism was then to, if indeed that would be considered, what's the mechanism to give authority to use that for a different project?
Okay. All right.
So that's the status right now.
I just committed. I would ask the questions.
Mhm.
I'm sorry we didn't get you $1 million in delinquent monies, but that's just a number.
Mhm.
It was almost $1 million. That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
I can't explain if there was a taxpayer that was delinquent that came through, but it's money on the table. So we collected 110%. That's unbelievable.
Mhm.
That's a lot of money being
Mhm.
collected. So I should tell you next year, count on 96%, but that's not going to be the case. It'll still be 98%. And then we'll go through this rigmarole again. My biggest concern, Deb, you've been doing this a while.
Yes, Amy, you were gonna ask about that, the PI. We had 671,000 in open encumbrances, and we sold a piece of property that we've had for sale for a while, Canfield Road, for 700,000. And that escalated my number.
Well, that's a good thing, because
And
that's a
we-
one-time
and we're
anomaly.
gonna spend it all in the next year,
That's what you
which I
gotta do.
proposed, yeah,
Because
absolutely. We have a list of projects.
you cannot have a variance of 10 factor
Hmm.
in anything you do.
I agree.
Little alarm bells are going off
Mhm.
night and day. So
You can see it in the revenue though, Chris.
Mhm.
Their estimated revenue was below $1 million. And they received 2.6 million in revenue.
Mhm.
That can't control revenue.
Mhm.
Revenue, I mean, right?
yes,
They control expenses. Her expenses were off by factor of 2 versus the revenue being off by factors of 4.
Mhm.
So
So did a PI get renewed? Is that what happened? Is that why it was so low? The prediction was off?
We moved the 1 mil to PI.
yeah, you moved, that's right, you did.
Mhm.
So you increased the
it's
revenue.
more concern. It's just a monetary budgeting concern.
Mhm.
The other piece I would add, I think Deb would echo this, is that with the transportation compound, we had Some of it is a timing issue. We had more work lined up to be completed. Weather simply didn't cooperate. Had some issues working with the city to get approvals on.
That's putting it nicely. They're terrible to you guys, in my humble opinion.
We worked together and worked through those issues.
I see
But,
that.
it caused a little bit of a timing issue. We were leaning pretty heavily on the construction manager and so on, architect to, hey, we need to get as much work done so that it would address that concern. We got as much done as we could. Some of it's just in a holding pattern right now due to can't pour concrete and things like that.
That's all.
Yeah. We have the benefit of, I think I drive by it, at least once a day. So, we can kind of, I've followed the progress of it. I mean, that's a great project. And again, getting those idling buses out away from the building where students are is, I think it's a great project. I'm sorry you had to deal with so much red tape because I know that delayed it significantly and probably be
We
close
lost
to being
about 2
done.
months. We lost about 2 months of.
Problem is when you lose that 2 months, you're losing the 2 months of good weather. And
Exactly.
now it's just
Right.
And cost increases in inflation.
mhm.
This asphalt's now gonna cost more than it did if we would have got it in before the winter.
Yeah, but it's a nice, I think it's a very nice looking project. I think it's very worthwhile. And again, our main criticism last year was the excessive cash balance, and you've addressed that. You've addressed it by spending the money on a project that really needed to be done, which is what we want. Either
Multiple, we've
Yeah.
got security vestibules in almost every building now. The last one's going in
One
the
going.
budget. Yep.
Yeah.
Weapons detection, new doors, new locks. We really beefed up on safety and security as recommended.
Yeah, I think that's great. So
Whose motion is it?
mine, move approved.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
We have,
Thank you very much for.
thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
We gotta
We gotta
give
give
you your,
Deb some stuff. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You have one of these?
Yep.
Yes, I think that. Thank you.
wait, this one, Chuck, the one with the postings there.
I
Give it away.
give away the post.
See you. Thanks.
Your rate resolutions inside.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deb. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have other business?
So, yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
What the? We haven't met.
It'll be quick.
Couple weeks
Don't worry.
I had a phone call from Diana County Clerk.
Okay.
Wants to learn operating the budget commission.
I sent everything over to your auditor.
I can't.
They should just log in for a meeting.
I gave them links to everything.
If I may.
Yeah.
I had told them it started at 9:30. Superintendent.
So being
They weren't-
chastised a
They
little.
were here on time.
Okay,
They were here on time.
I'm glad
so
I
that
heard
was-
what you said.
and you were on time.
So, and you
Yeah,
started,
based on the 9:30.
started
yeah.
very early
So,
actually, because.
I didn't even
was
think about
9:20
that
And I
because I
ran
got
it
here
when
at
I
9.
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
So I would have
No
been
worries.
sitting in one of these chairs had you started.
No, I'm glad that you
said
did
were-
something.
I just want to make sure you guys.
Yes.
Starting early may not be the best plan, so just saying. Since
Well,
people.
well, my
if you're
understanding is
giving
we
a point-
advertised them back to back, correct?
Yeah.
No, we advertised.
Advertised to
At
start
9
at
a.m.
9 and
They were advertised at 9
it was
a.m.
an estimate, basically.
We just give people
So
an
then
estimate.
there's a misunderstanding. Now that I have had the privilege of being here and seeing how this works, I guess I would understand that then for next time that really everyone is supposed to be here at 9. Is that the?
Well, yeah, if you're the third person in line, obviously you're not gonna get called at 9 o'clock. And we give you order and we give you start time.
Senator Kenston had $50 million in cash carryover. Their hearing would
You
have been an
could
hour.
wait.
Right.
Make it real clear.
So welcome to come tomorrow.
To the
Those will be interesting.
Right.
But I just want to make sure you do. I had told them.
Thank you.
9:30.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you
Take care.
very much.
Okay, so budget hearing ended at 10:16.
Sure.
Okay. Prior meeting minutes.
Oh, yeah. So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 3rd, 2025 as submitted.
Second.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
I think it's on.
Next item we have is the Berkshire 2024-25 Amendment number 6. They have a change in special revenue funds, a net adjustment of $3,200. New special revenue total of $4,342,851.15. New total certificate $35,230,220.25, and appropriations do not exceed.
So moved.
Second, yes.
Thompson Township, 2025 Amendment number 1. It's a re-signed clerical error. The formula did not report correctly on a figure for police levy. So the original motion was made by Frank and seconded by Jim. So,
Hope to have Frank sign it. Or can I can
I
sign it.
think you can sign it because he was your alternate.
Okay.
Yeah, you
And
can-
that's how we referenced it.
so this is the total, corrected total certificates, $2,216,608.56.
yeah, I don't think that changed.
Okay,
The police, yeah,
It did?
yeah. Well,
Okay.
it was reading along, so.
Okay.
Here, we'll throw the minutes down there to the way around.
All right, City of Chardon, Amendment number 1. They submitted their year-end balances, so their new general fund total is $15,400,616.59. New special revenue fund total $9,976,345.48. New debt service fund total $375,784.14. New capital project fund total $8,193,153. New enterprise fund total $7,162,660.92. New internal service fund $8,054.18. And new fiduciary fund total is $184,200.53 for a grand total $41,300,814.84. Net change in beginning balances is $8,790,530.06. And then there was $1,080,293 change in tax rate.
Excuse me.
What do you say? Yeah. Is my- is it my
8
mo-
million, no, it's mine. So moved,
Second.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, next we have Chester Township Amendment number 1. They submitted their year-end balances. New general fund total is $3,492,493.16. New special revenue funds total is $12,244,120.75. New capital projects fund total is $282,900. New special assessment fund total is $13,486.55. Total certificate is $16,033,046. Net change in beginning balances is $2,066,677.74. Net change in tax revenue is a decrease of $87,936, and net change in other source revenue is $24,980.42. And temporary appropriations do not exceed.
So moved.
Second,
Yes,
Yes.
Next, we have Burton Township Amendment number 1. They submitted their year-end balances. New general fund total is $560,692.70. New special revenue fund total is $1,542,462.99. And total certificate is $2,103,155.69. Net change in beginning balance is $191,052.88. Net change in tax revenue is a decrease of $139,220. And net change in other source revenue is also a decrease of $8,429.
so moved.
second, yes.
Yes.
Newberry Township Amendment number 1, they submitted their year-end balances. New general fund total is $1,776,898.97. New special revenue fund total is $4,093,745.92. New debt service fund is $390,588.24. Capital project fund total is 511,344.33. New special assessment fund total is $35.64. Total certificate is 6,722,613.10.
772,
772, yeah.
61310.
Yep.
Okay.
Net change in beginning balances is 381,111.03. Net change in tax revenue is 53,572, and net change in other source revenue is 102,100.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
South Russell Village, amendment number 2, they had a net adjustment in their capital project fund of 121,855.63. New capital project fund total is 2,593,427.25. New total certificate is 12,093,349.28, and appropriations do not exceed.
So moved. That was your turn.
You move.
So moved. Second.
Yes.
Yes.
I already started signing. That's why. Oh, I can tell.
I'm ready to go.
The test.
Munson Township, amendment number 1, they submitted their year-end balances. Their new general fund total is 1,829,832.32. New special revenue fund total is 4,643,156.60. Capital project fund total is 175,000. New special assessment fund total is 2,100. Total certificate is 6,650,88.92. Net change in beginning balances is 341,840.52. Tax revenue is 29,856, and net change in other source revenue is a decrease of 198,779.
You took a breath. I thought that was,
Yeah. How dare you?
Sorry.
no more breathing for you.
Sorry.
Second. Yes.
Resources and appropriations.
Appropriations do not exceed.
Yes.
Chris and me.
It's then you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Auburn Township submitted their year-end balances. New general fund total is 1,064,695.30. Special revenue fund total is 5,606,831.78. Debt service fund is 217,160. Capital project fund is 222,270.21. Total certificate 7,110,957.29. Net change in beginning balances is 1,416,832.02. Net change in tax revenue is 587,842, and net change in other source revenue is a decrease of 14,363, and temporary appropriations do not exceed.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Burton Village, amendment number 1.
They're not gonna do their year end.
Their year-end balances were submitted. Their new general fund total is 1,871,798.39. New special revenue fund total is 2,095,669.78. Capital project fund total is 1,237,38.11. New special assessment fund total is 57,443.41. Enterprise fund total is $3,968,200.32. Fiduciary fund total is 147,841.21. Total certificate is 9,377,991.22. Net change in beginning balance is 1,613,586.41.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Resources and appropriations.
Appropriations do not exceed. Geauga Trumbull Solid Waste has a supplemental appropriation from their 6007 fund in the amount of 99,000. New unappropriated balance is 2,814,432.48.
So moved.
Second. Yes.
Yes.
And Geauga County has amendment number 3. They have an adjustment, an increase in their senior center fund of 600,000. Their new capital project fund total is 27,595,517.01. Total certificate is 286,761,635.81.
Where are they taking it from the general fund?
There weren't any in
They
here.
had a bunch of money in there.
They did a series. They did cash transfer and then a supplemental.
What's that? What fund is that?
Their fund is 4019. That's the capital
It's a
fund,
capital project.
probably at the end of the year.
Yep. 4019, senior center.
But it went to zero. I mean, they were at zero. They put in revenue.
No. Well, yeah, but they had an unencumbered carryover
Carryover.
balance over $2 million. Almost $2 million. So their new balance is 2,586,790 or 979.66.
And that's-
It's just odd to me that they throw 600,000 in there when they don't have a plan. Or do they have a plan?
and they haven't shared it with us, but we have their stuff is coming up soon. Is it the 17th, right? It's the
Mhm.
day.
Whose motion?
It's mine. So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Yes. Any public comment?
The only
Big
thing,
change request, budget and mental health. What's
Yeah.
going on there?
mental health, won't be able to be there on the 17th, so she asked if they could be the first meeting in April instead.
She's out of the country. She's,
Yeah.
When are we doing theirs? March 17th?
yes.
Oh, yeah. Forgot we're doing these on St. Patrick's Day. So who do we have? We have aging, JFS.
Engineer and DODD.
And then mental health will be in April.
Mental health's already in April?
Well, no, they
That's what
can't
Jack
go.
requested.
They can't.
Wait, this is mental health. So we're doing ED also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long day. Some green beer after that. So that would be to move it to April 7th? That's what I have down as our
Okay,
meeting.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, you? I don't know that,
because we did hear back from, I know we heard back from aging, we heard back from, did we hear from Katie from engineers yet?
I don't think
No,
so.
we haven't heard from engineers yet.
I mean, can't they just send another person?
This is Christine.
Christine,
She's the one.
yeah, she's
She's
kind of the one in
she's kind of
charge, I
hands-on.
think.
yeah, well, they have the, what's
They have
the
the board.
budget
Jim.
guy.
Jim Melzer.
Yeah.
Their board can.
Guessed how long he was working here. 20 years. Felt a little bad about that.
I get that question a lot, though.
Yeah, I'd make a motion. Does you guys have a problem with it? Chuck, you look like you have heartburn.
I'm right.
Okay, I make a motion to move the mental health board's budget hearing to April 7th at 10 a.m. to coincide with our regularly scheduled budget commission meeting.
But I assume we're talking within the first 8 mile.
A second.
Yes.
Then
Before we
public comment.
To public comment, I would like to offer my comment. I thought Chuck's presentation was the best yet. It's so helpful. It gives everybody not just a snapshot, it goes into detail. It's the little bit of history, and where they're going, how they compare with other districts. I know you put a lot of effort into it, and
It's called budget wrong.
well, that's the French.
Budget debt?
Yes. C for we.
Yeah, I would make a suggestion that we don't put different times on the documents. We should put everybody at 9 a.m.
Yeah,
Especially if we have a contentious hearing and they're using that, they could use that as an argument against us that we started before the hearing time. Even though in this case, we advertised it for 9 o'clock, I don't want to give anybody,
Well, Terry fessed up. He told her 9:30.
well, on the top of their sheet, it said 9:30.
mhm.
But that sheet is not the public notice. That
Mhm.
sheet is just for our reference, approximately when we start. Make them 9 o'clock. Who
Mhm.
cares?
Okay. Fair enough.
Everybody should get the same time vote and move on.
Yeah. And now that we've staggered them, I don't know that it's.
Well, like to your
I
point,
mean, Berkshire was here a day early.
some could go, quick. Some could go quick and So we're gonna open this for public comment.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, any public comment from anybody that's online?
Hi, this
Sarah?
is Sarah
Hi, Sarah.
from the league. I'm sorry I can't be there. My dad's been in the hospital, so I've been with him for the last few days. But I'm glad that you have the virtual attendance option. So appreciate that always. I was wondering, is there anyone there I can't see? I think that might be Pam there across from you.
Yep,
Is there
she's
anybody
there.
else over there?
Josh is in the corner.
Okay. cool.
Josh with ADP. He's just
Yeah,
running.
Dr. ADP. Yeah, he's running
Yep.
the slides and everything. I was wondering if you would be able to share, I know you'll send me the certificates as usual, but are you able to share like the slides from Chuck's presentation today with
Yeah,
me?
I'm going to correct my misspelling first, if that's okay, though. I don't want to publish.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's totally
Draft,
fine. It's
that's
just
fine.
helpful to get the exact numbers. But yeah, if you could share like slides, I don't know if you
Yep.
have a sign-in sheet. I
We
know
do.
sometimes you do handouts, so any of that kind of stuff you have, if you could share with me, that would be helpful. And I think that's it. And I'll see you tomorrow. I don't know if I'll be there in person or not. It just kind of depends on how things go. So,
Okay.
Okay, well.
Do you want a copy of Chris's incorrect sheet that he's handing out to everybody?
like the infamous spreadsheet? Yeah.
No.
It's the tax collection.
Okay, I didn't think I'd be that lucky. All right.
The delinquent bragging sheet with the wrong year.
I was just going to say. I didn't give me a copy, but I looked over and went, wrong year.
I have to check into that, but I think we got a significant amount of money from, there was a sale involving the Wilds, maybe, were they behind?
Yes, the Wilds were.
I know we got a huge
bankrupt.
delinquency in South Russell. That was the one that was in
Yeah.
the federal foreclosure. that
Yes,
we did a lot of work
right
on
across
that.
from your development.
Yes, we got a lot of delinquent tax on that.
That was like $500,000.
Oh, it was more than that. It was a lot. But I feel like the Wilds might have been
Could have been.
a big chunk of money too.
That's good.
Yeah.
No, I'll get you. Is it okay, Sarah, if I give you my PowerPoints after tomorrow's meeting? Because I don't want to
Yes.
give their PowerPoints before they see them. It's
Yes,
it's one PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah, no, that would be perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. No worries.
Hope your dad does better.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions,
Comments? Anybody else?
comments? Kudos, rewards.
Okay,
All right.
and then we got
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
There's always tomorrow.
Do we have any other business tomorrow, you think, or no? We're just doing those.
Well, we'll prepare the certificate for Cardinal for you guys to
Yeah.
sign. And then, as of now, no. But if someone sends something in, we'll
I'll make
That's
a
no problem.
motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yeah.